probably got the slightly worrying that the slides are backwards. I presume that doesn't happen on the actual script. I don't know.
Is it to do with?
Is that recording as well?
No, they're separate. That one's recording to itself, to the internal memory, nowhere else, and that's streaming.
Where's that from?
I don't know. Don't worry about it. The slides are the right around. Yeah, because on the picture here, they're backwards.
Is that where the feet came from?
Yeah.
I think it's something to do with it's like selfie cameras take it
Yeah,
that way. So like if you're showing someone one thing on one side,
Yeah,
it means you're not doing it back to front the way that people
So I
do.
reckon YouTube knows this flip it or something.
Yeah,
Must do. It's YouTube. They must.
it's like selfie camera mode, isn't it?
Yeah, it's just this.
It's just selfie camera mode. That's what it's doing. So if you take a selfie, things that's fun, aren't they?
I do, but like when you're
I think about it.
Is that the wrong way around?
Yeah, so I'm doing selfie.
hoping you would laugh.
20? Yeah, it's not. Yeah, no, it's cool. It's not like I'm taking out. I don't think you can talk about this subject for that long enough. People want to see.
I'll give it a few minutes.
Yeah, exactly.
How much Harry likes it.
It started off as that. It started off as that. And now it's
Easy Carol. There we go. We don't need it.
oh yeah. It's all M&S. We just thought that some of the companies that do the bespoke rights are just such a force. And it's like, why are you getting ridiculous?
It's like,
There's loads of famous ones.
Yeah, what's Lindbergh like? It's a little tiny kind of. I mean, like,
Yeah. A little tray.
little fast.
Very good point. Michelle is fantastic.
Has Michelle?
I have no idea. I just had
Yeah, very good.
So they're going to
Yeah.
No, you are absolutely right. And
should we open that?
I get one.
yeah, you are quite. You are quite. Because you've got work sliding around.
So they get a very nice.
No, just make sure it's live. Oh shit! Yeah.
No, it's not kind of right.
Is it live? Is it happening?
Yeah, it's live. That's for me.
That's good. No,
It's just.
Yours are not the spring.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, would you like to take your seats
Yes.
for Nick from Troy? Way!
Away from sit down first.
It's only got a good cheer.
Lots of seats in front. Oh, this was prime position.
This is what
Cool, I'll start then. So today I want to talk about employee referrals. I don't know kind of consensus wise how much people know about this, but obviously I'm going to run through it. But the context is essentially hiring is difficult, particularly for startups. So to give you a bit of context, there's 1,300 startups in the Southeast alone, and that's not even including all the thousands of other businesses that are out there, and they're all looking for excellent talent to help them grow. There's lots of different ways that you can recruit. Some are very expensive, some are less so, but you can advertise, you can directly source people. And I guess an employer referral scheme run properly is another way to actually bring strong talent into a business. So it's something I've been discussing with Justine as another, I guess, channel, if you like, to help bring people into the business. So I'm going to start off with a meme, obviously. Fine. So we're going to. So this is talking about what an employer referral is. So the kind of the simplest definition there is, it's a scheme designed to encourage companies' existing employees to select and recruit people from their social and professional networks. And I guess it's just a reminder to incentivize people to do that, basically. So why do it? It can be cheap. I know Thomas was interested in finding out how. But just to give you, some really rough figures around that. If you're using an agency for a software developer based on a 50k salary, which again is a very broad figure, that will cost £7,500 in itself. And that doesn't even account for the time it takes out of people's diaries to interview, sift through CVs. It is a huge business cost. And then it can also speed up a process. This is by no means foolproof, but the idea is that you could actually have a short list of people presented by people who already work here, which saves a huge amount of time from starting a full process, which can take, it can take a week to get from start to shortlist, for example. And a growing business doesn't always have the luxury of that time. It can enhance the quality and relevance of the applicant as well, and by that I mean, so for example, if it's a software developer and you recommend someone that you've worked with, whether they're good or not, what skills they've used and haven't used. You also know how good they're going to be as a cultural fit for Snap as well, having worked with them before and having understood this particular culture too. And that's why it can be a very good thing for culture, because that's kind of the unknown bit, that you, by knowing kind of what someone's like personally, you're going to be able to get an understanding of what they're going to be like in this particular kind of organization as well. And I do really like this point around accountability across the company. Everyone has a say on who joins the business. And it's transparent. Everyone's aware of who's hiring, why they're hiring, and it does kind of give everyone kind of more of a say in how the company grows as well. So this is the do's of what we should be doing in an employer referral scheme. You need to offer an incentive that's attractive, and that doesn't necessarily mean money. It means for it to work, people are most likely going to do something if they get something out of it they like. So that could be duvet days, it could be extra holiday, it could be gift vouchers, it could be a team lunch, team night out, it could be anything. And I think that it's important to actually make that so that people here actually want to buy into it. As I mentioned earlier, you need to make sure the whole company is actually involved, rather than it just being a cliquey scheme that only a few people are aware of. Keeping the referral up to date is really important, because it could be a personal friend and they're asking, what's happening with Snap and that role, and unless people are actually aware on both sides, that can actually cause damage rather than be a positive thing. You obviously need to ensure that the roles available within Snap are being advertised in the right channel. So for example's sake, you could have a Slack channel that is hires or something like that, and everyone signed up to it and they can see that. And you also need to publicize the successes as well, whether that's the weekly check-in, telling everyone, putting it on Slack so everyone's actually aware of you know, who's done what. And it does kind of help foster that kind of togetherness culture as well. And there's another meme. It's probably not the most used meme in the world, this one, isn't it? There's some don'ts too. So we don't refer for the sake of it. I've got some horror stories in my last company where people, I think there was a guy called Jordan, I remember him well, but he referred 8 people to the company I work for, which none of them were actually selected for face-to-face interview because they could barely, it was in a recruitment agency and they couldn't even speak on the phone, which is obviously quite a kind of fundamental part of that job. So I guess by that, I mean, only refer someone if you genuinely think it's a fit for both Snap and the person. It's not always going to be perfect. They might take another job or what have you, or they might not be right technically, but at least do it for the right reasons. And you don't want to overdo the amount of referrals that you have as well, because you do end up with you can end up with a culture where there's too many people who have got the same train of thought. And that doesn't necessarily breed kind of diversity in terms of how you actually want to progress things. You want different ideas from different people. You don't want it to be too kind of matey and cliquey. There's kind of a line between being, collaborative and getting on well, and kind of going too far the other way. And you can't just rely on referrals, because there are plenty of people out there who are suitable who we don't know as well. I shouldn't have used a colloquial language here, but, but do it. Basically, I'm saying there's no point just doing it and not doing it properly, or just don't bother. If you're not going to do it properly, you need to follow it through and have people actually engaged in it. Is what I'm saying there. So this is how we do it. So I guess the first thing you need to do is actually decide what you want to get out of the scheme. So I've got some metrics here. That could be get a higher percentage of high quality applicants for each role. It could be increase the total number of referrals in general across the business. It could be a time to hire matrix. I don't know what that is here, but it could be helping to reduce that overall, which obviously then saves the business money. The average cost per hire, you could be looking at reducing that, which this can definitely do. And also turnover rate. People are more or less likely to leave roles when they are referred. I don't know the exact science behind it, but it's because the cultural aspect essentially is right. And you can also look at it as an employee engagement tool. You can also measure that as well. You also need to, I guess, engage as a business and decide what is attractive to each person personally in terms of what they would want their rewards to be. As I mentioned earlier, that could be holiday, it could be cash, it could be all manner of different things, but you need to make sure it's something that people are going to buy into. Working out a sensible process of how to actually track it. So we've got an applicant tracking system, Workable, that we use. So that's the most logical way that you do that. So just making sure that's as transparent as possible. Everyone knows what they need to do when they refer someone. And then setting up rules. So that could be things like 2 people referring the same person. You both can't have a reward for that, unfortunately. That's not how it would work. Otherwise, everyone would just refer the same person and expect money from it or what have you. So yeah, there needs to be some sensible rules. And then obviously you need to...
Nick, you were saying about proving that you know that person as well.
Yeah, so you need to be able to essentially have contact details for one. That shows you actually know that person, but you also need to, I guess, provide a bit of information about that person as well, what their motivations are, roughly what their skills are. It doesn't need to be perfect. Someone might be referring a software developer, they might not know much about technology, so you're not going to be able to talk about what their approach to API architecture is, for example, because that's a bit too in depth. But you need to prove that you kind of aware of that person is. Otherwise you could, for examples I had at Venn Group before my last company, where people were just going on job boards, getting a CV and just sending that into the referral scheme, trying to get like 250 quid each time. It's not within the spirit of what I said to do. it's just pointless. It's not because you get 250 quid out of it, but it's not the point. In terms of what's next, so obviously been discussing this with Justine, so we're going to confirm a process, and then this will be communicated over the coming weeks in terms of what it's going to look like. We haven't confirmed what the next steps are going to be, so I can't go into too much detail, but I think the first thing is to understand what people would actually want from it, what rewards are actually going to be, attractive to people, and then obviously we'll refer away thereafter. There's another me. Yeah, any questions?
It seems such an obvious idea. Why don't more companies do it? I mean, I'm thinking about both my previous corporate employers. I mean, either if they did it, I didn't know about it, which means they didn't. But I mean, did they?
Yeah, we had two versions. We had one for drivers, but we also had one for managerial as well. They were different levels set accordingly.
Yeah.
Well, we had it was called referral frame.
Yeah, I think people don't do it because they don't necessarily kind of think about doing it, like quite simply because it's kind of like, well, this is work. Why are we bringing people's kind of social and kind of previous professional networks into it? It's just not. I don't know. Maybe it's just quite an obvious thing that people miss. But I think most companies, particularly corporate businesses, do have referral schemes. They're just not done very well. They're generally owned by, the whole business doesn't own it. It's something that one person in HR, for example, might control, and it just gets forgotten about. Whereas it needs to be kind of consistent. They work with bigger business. It needs to be on the internet. It needs to be obvious. It needs to be, and they also don't have sight of the different hiring that's actually going on. So it might happen on a kind of micro kind of team level, but it won't happen, company wide, for example. So yeah, I think it does happen, but it's just done badly in summary.
Is there some hesitance for these kind of programs, because obviously it's quite personal if someone's referring their best mate and saying, my mate Jim, he's great, he's fantastic, he'll do well here, and then the HR manager's like, yeah, your friend's a bit shit. I mean, it's like you feel like you're rejecting the person who's made the referral as well as.
Yeah, I mean that's why it's kind of you should do it when you think it's right. I mean, if it's someone who does a different job to you, you might not know the ins and outs of it. But you're right, it is tough. But that's why you need to be transparent and just be. There's no point in say Justine thinking he's crap, and then. But then that needs to kind of be relayed back in a way that at least everyone's aware it's just not the right fit for you, rather than you don't want him to be, building resentment against Snap, because that could then have kind of knock-on business effects. Like you might not ever use Snap for coach travel again, which is so done badly can affect revenue.
Sure.
So it's like Virgin Media it's slightly different but kind of similar type thing. The Virgin Media, obviously a huge organisation, they have loads and loads of applicants to jobs. But they actually tracked the candidates that got rejected and saw how many of them actually cancelled Virgin Media subscriptions. Huge amount. I don't know the exact percentage, but it's way bigger than the general churn. So
take that, Richard.
From my experience of Virgin Media, you don't need much to put it.
But yeah, so they actually started tracking it, and it's actually improved their kind of engagement process as a result, because it's genuinely losing money.
Are there any negatives? I mean, you can lose people to other referral schemes, I presume.
Yeah, I mean, in theory, yeah. I mean, but there's it's 1,300 startups in the southeast that is also looking for good people. So
yeah, there is.
I think I mean, there's always kind of the what if you do it badly, but I think you can only really look after yourselves in that scenario. If you can do everything you can, then it's kind of one small part of actually making a company that people don't want to leave as well. So you kind of look at it from a positive perspective.
And that's what I like about it, is the fact that you actually get the data on how many referrals are being made. Because one of the things we ask in employee surveys, would you recommend staff as a place to work? And anyone can say yes. Whereas actually, if you are, that's absolute proof that people like this as a workplace. So as we grow and the business changes, and if we start to see the proportion of referrals dropping off, then that's a health check indicator for our corporate culture, which is brilliant. It's a data source in its own right.
Yeah, exactly.
It also depends on knowing someone to refer in the first place, because I mean, you can't hold it against me if I don't refer anyone. I don't know anyone to refer, so it's kind of like.
But what I mean is an aggregate. If we put a job out, and in the olden days we used to get 5 employee referrals for each average job, and now we're getting 1, then that suggests that in aggregate the company doesn't feel like this is a place they want to tell their mates about, and that would be. I mean, that would be something I'd want to know about if that were the case,
I guess that it will naturally dry up if you are retaining staff, because people are going to not have worked in different places to be able to refer people. But in theory, the more people you hire, the network should expand, and you should have a bigger social and professional network. But then on the flip side of that, if you're referring people that you work with at a previous company, they're all from that company, then you kind of almost start making it smaller. But it's not perfect, but it is in general giving you a wider mix. I mean, it needs to be done properly, otherwise.
How do people usually track if something is through a referral? So I know in Workable you can tag to put the employee's name down who's referring. But then if we wanted to look back at data to see the quantity of referrals in the past and how many have been successful, to kind of analyse that data. How do people do that?
There are specialist kind of tools. Some of them are free actually for like employee engagement scheme, employee referral scheme. Sorry, so it depends what way you want to go with it. I mean, I wouldn't have thought that the data would be so overwhelming at this point that it would be too difficult to actually track. But if you wanted to get something in place, I can recommend some tools so you can actually track that long term as well.
Brilliant. And you're following up with more details on the scheme soon-ish. Brilliant. Any more questions for Nick? Brilliant. Thanks very much, Nick.
Tom's bringing in data scientists.
I think
the founders are technically referrals and some
that's right.
Get money for it.